Guess what I'm going to do now, right after I finish this video. I'm going to finish this book by Beth Simmons, Mobilizing for Human Rights. It's a very interesting thesis. Basic idea is that human rights treaties do make a difference, and when countries sign them, they change their practices, especially countries that are somewhere in the middle between an authoritarian regime and a democracy. And just before I read this book, I just finished this one, Internationalist. It's a book by Una Hathaway and Scott Shapiro from Yale, who argue that the main change that happened in international law can be traced back to the forgotten Kell-O'Brien Pact that basically forbade war, and that even though this treaty itself was a failure and it came just before World War II, it started a process in international law that made a fundamental change and made war illegal. And what I'm going to do right after I finish Beth Simmons' book, I'm going to start up on these easy Danish books. I don't know if they're that easy, but there's a whole match here. So there's a translation of Zygmunt Bauman, a self-help book about taking breaks, a book about writing. Now, why do I present these books? Because part of the purpose of this series of lectures is to help multilinguals improve their English and also improve as a researcher. So it is important to read a lot of books in English continuously. But if you know several other languages, either much better than English or much worse than English or about the same, I recommend to you spend some time with other languages, especially reading quick and easy books. And the reason I want you to do that is that these books are fundamentally different in their capacity to affect your research compared to huge theses that are classics in the field or that will become classics in the field because they're so of a magnitude. Let me explain why. If you read a very well-developed, well-crafted argument, a masterpiece, your ability to take it apart and use the pieces of the arguments in your own research or just in your own inner world of ideas, if you're not an active academic, is limited. It's limited because if you have a scholar who is a genius and practiced for 10 or 20 years trying to write a magnum opus, it's very unlikely that they left a lot of loose corners, loose endings, in the research for their work. On the other hand, if you read these books, get an understanding, have strong empirical claims, solid views, strong philosophical claims, and then you add on top of them creative ideas that you get from books that you can read much more quickly and much more easily. This will enrich your inner world and enrich your research significantly. Now, of course, another advantage is that if you do that, you continuously build your other languages as well. So if, for me, for example, it's very important to continuously read also in Danish, even though the masterpieces that I read are usually in English, I would read regularly easier books in Danish and in French and in German and in my native Hebrew throughout the year, continuously keeping myself comfortable as much as possible with these languages. I don't always manage to do it with all of them at the same time, and sometimes it's a bit of a pity, but it's an important exercise that I do. So in addition to giving me the exercise, a regular exercise of a language, I also get the ability to get creative and interesting and new ideas all the time infused into my research. If you read a book, let's say one of these numerous editions of short books about philosophy or about ideas, it may not be perfectly crafted, it may not be ideal, but that's not the point. The point is that you learn ideas out of it, and then you can use them as if it were your own. Of course, you can properly cite the original source or whatever if you are an academic, but weave them into your own inner world, weave them into your ideas. These books, these short, the easier books, or even if it's a hard book, but you read it in a much less dedicated way. So you would read it quickly and try to see what you can grab out of it. These are the satellites. Okay, so imagine that the great works of research are like the massive planets that and around them there are many satellites that are shorter, easier works, or works that are read in a much freer manner. In this way, you are able to build an active inner life and an active fountain of research. Now, being a multilingual comes with a great advantage because you're able to locate books in the language that you know. For example, if I would not know Danish, it would be very difficult for me to find such easy books in other languages. Here I just go to the library and there are tens of thousands of books like this for free that I can use. So if you want to travel, and you should travel as another, probably the most important thing to enrich your fountain of ideas is to travel a lot, learn the languages of the locals, and very quickly go to reading them. Now, I recommend that you start to do that very early on. When I came to Denmark, I immediately started to take, at the time it was a free newspaper at the metro. I took it every time and I read it. Then I shifted to reading just really simple crappy book like romantic novels for teenage girls, because that's what I found immediately and it was available, and I just read it. And I just read book after book, and there are tens and hundreds of books that I read and got better over time. So it's a great way to exercise, and very quickly you start to also get ideas and embed them into your research, which is really the key benefit of satellites. It's not just with the ideas that are useful, it's that you can take them apart and take bits and pieces of them, put them inside your research, and use them to get better. To conclude, read regularly, read a lot of masterpieces, but don't neglect the satellites, and read them in the languages that you know, so that you get continuously a flow of ideas that makes you an active intellectual always. My name is Shai Dotan. I'm Associate Professor of International Public Law at the University of Copenhagen Faculty of Law. And the purpose of this series of lectures is to help you improve your English and improve your research. If you want to learn more about special advantages that you have as a multilingual and how this can help you to become a better researcher, and how can you build your English if you're a multilingual, feel free to check my book, How to Master English as a Multilingual. I put a full picture right in a second. Thank you very much.